They laughed at her for dressing plainly. They called her a lost tourist, but with one shot, everything went silent. She didn't just hit the bullseye, she shattered a national record. And what left the entire shooting range speechless was who she really was. This isn't fiction. This is how a quiet woman overturned an entire elite circle with a promise. That afternoon, the National Open Shooting Championship was entering its final qualifying round. Spectators flocked to the outdoor arena like it was a festival. Everyone dressed in premium athletic gear, wearing specialized shooting glasses, chatting in technical jargon that sounded like a foreign language to outsiders. But amid the glittering crowd, one woman made heads turn. She wore a faded security uniform, the word security peeling off her chest. Her hair was tied back neatly, her sneakers were worn, and she held an ordinary spectator ticket. She found a seat in the back row, quietly placed her backpack at her feet, and gazed out at the shooting range with an oddly calm expression in her deep brown eyes. Troy Haynes, three-time reigning champion, was speaking to the media at center stage. Tall, with the swagger of an action star, his voice oozed arrogance as he mentioned how new shooters should learn humility. This sport isn't for amateurs or school security guards. A scoff echoed from the VIP section. A young sharpshooter pointed toward the woman in the security uniform and whispered to his friends, "Hey, think she's here to take shooting lessons?" The group burst into laughter. The woman didn't react. She simply tugged her sleeve down, covering a thin scar running along her left wrist, and kept observing. Suddenly, the loudspeaker crackled to life. To add some excitement, the organizers are opening a special challenge, the open shot test, where audience members can attempt to hit moving targets. The winner will receive a $20,000 prize from reigning champion Troy Haynes. Warning, it's extremely difficult. Only those who are truly confident should register. The woman stood up, her hand clenched the strap of her backpack. "Ma'am, what are you doing?" A staff member stepped in front of her. "I'm signing up for the challenge." Her voice was low, steady. Troy turned, disbelief in his eyes. "You? Are you sure? Or are you planning to scare the targets with a whistle?" The crowd erupted in laughter. She said nothing, just handed over her ID. Her name was Linda Hayes. Troy glanced at the name, smirking. "All right then, Linda Hayes. If you hit all 3 moving targets at 60 yards, I'll donate the $20,000 to some charity." "You clearly don't need the money," she replied. "The STEM Scholarship Fund for girls at the high school where I work as a security guard, if I win." And then, to the astonishment of hundreds, Linda stepped onto the shooting range, a place where someone like her was never meant to stand. "Do you have your own gun?" the range officer asked hesitantly. Linda shook her head. "Can I borrow one?" "Standard issue." Troy burst out laughing. "She doesn't even own a gun, and she wants to challenge the national champion?" Another young shooter chimed in. "Give her an old Glock. If she hits a moving target with that, it'll be a miracle." Linda paid no attention. She tested the trigger, adjusted her grip, checked her line of sight through the rear sight notch. Every movement was clean, precise, like someone who'd done it thousands of times, yet subtle enough not to draw attention. Except from one man. An old gentleman in a club technician's uniform stood at the edge of the range. His eyes followed Linda, narrowing slightly as he watched her rotate her wrist and adjust trigger pressure. That move, it was the kind only someone seasoned in the military or special forces would know. "Starting in 60 seconds, the loudspeaker announced. 3 human-shaped targets would appear randomly on moving tracks, changing direction unpredictably. 60 yards out, far too distant for an unmodified Glock. And this challenge, supposed to be just for fun. But today, nothing about it was a joke. Linda stood still, eyes closed. In that moment, the noise began to fade, replaced by the sound of a voice, familiar, deep, and calm. "Control your breath. Don't follow with your eyes. Trust your hands. When the noise disappears, that's your moment to shoot." It was her husband's voice, Daniel Hayes, a former MARSOC officer who died 4 years ago during an undisclosed mission. Few knew that Linda had trained with Daniel every weekend for 6 years. He used to say that if she'd been born in different circumstances, she could have been a top-tier Special Forces marksman. A beep rang out. The challenge had begun. The crowd held its breath. One target shot out to the left, then suddenly veered right. Linda didn't move. Her hand raised the gun, slowly but steady. She held her breath, adjusted her angle. Bang! The first shot rang out. The target dropped, hit clean in the center of the chest, a perfect bullseye. The entire range froze for a moment. Just luck, Troy muttered, forcing a smile, but there was a flicker of doubt in his voice now. Linda didn't answer. She had already spotted the second target beginning to move. She wasn't just playing for $20,000. She was reopening a door to a life once closed by loss and silence. Only this time, hundreds of people were watching. The second target appeared, this time moving faster. It shot from right to left, then suddenly paused for half a second mid-track before accelerating toward the far end of the range. Troy's hand twitched slightly, as if he, too, now felt the pressure from the woman no one had paid attention to before. Linda adjusted her angle, lowered her stance, inhaled, held her breath. Bang! Once again, the target's head snapped back. The shot hit square in the forehead, a spot no one had managed to hit all week, not even the seasoned members. The crowd stirred. A few who had only stopped to watch for fun now pulled out their phones to record. One nearby shooter muttered, "Who is she?" Troy frowned and glanced at the old range technician. The man remained still, leaning on his cane, but his lips pressed into a tight line, a rare expression of doubt, or maybe recognition. The final target appeared. This one was smaller, modeled after a child-sized dummy running in the opposite direction, designed for high-level training that required identifying dangerous targets. If you shot the wrong one, your entire score was voided, and with a standard Glock, accuracy dropped significantly under speed. Linda lowered her gun slightly as if hesitating. Troy pounced on the moment. "Out of tricks already?" he called out, laughing loudly, trying to reclaim the spotlight. Then Linda pulled the trigger. Bang! The bullet struck the edge of the target, hitting a small red marker, the target's foot, the only area that wouldn't cost points if fired upon. A target discrimination shot, the kind only those trained in elite military units would know how to execute. No one said a word. No one dared. This was no longer a game. Linda had just completed a challenge that many professional marksmen had failed. Troy swallowed hard, his hand tightening on his headset. His eyes no longer held arrogance, only fear, as if staring at something he didn't understand. Just then, the old range technician spoke up. His voice was low but clear, like unearthing a memory no one expected. "I know you, Linda Hayes. You applied to the reserve sniper program back in 2014, scored perfectly, then suddenly withdrew. Because of Daniel, right?" The name Daniel made several people flinch. Daniel Hayes, the legend of Marsoc, lost in a shadow operation in the Middle East. Now people were beginning to connect the dots. Linda gave a small nod. "I never wanted to be remembered just because of him," she said softly. "Today, I just wanted to prove I once stood beside a legend, not to hide in his shadow, but to grow in my own light." The air at the shooting range thickened like it does before a storm. No one spoke loudly anymore. No one laughed. Dozens of eyes now fixed on Linda, not like they were looking at an outsider, but like they were watching an unpredictable variable. Troy took off his headset and stepped forward, the arrogance in his stride now slightly cracked. He needed to regain control. The pride of being the leader of the state's top civilian sniper team wouldn't allow some nobody woman to steal the spotlight. "All right, Linda," he said with a forced smile. "If those 3 shots weren't just luck, then prove it. This is the real challenge now." He signaled to his assistant. Instantly, they brought out an advanced moving target system, the kind only used in national championships. 6 targets moving in unpredictable patterns, popping up randomly for just 1 to 3 seconds at a time. Hitting all 6 required speed, reflexes, and precision, enough to make even elite shooters break a sweat. 6-target challenge. Hit them all in under 15 seconds and I'll give you a special spot on the club's coaching team. But if you can't, he smirked, you'll walk away and don't ever come back. A soft "oh" rippled through the crowd. Linda looked at him, then at the newly installed targets. She stayed silent. No one knew that in that very moment there was no anger in her heart, only a deep sadness. Because the real challenge wasn't the 6 shots. It was the weight of eyes that had never believed in someone like her. She turned, about to speak, when suddenly a hand reached out from behind. "This is an honorary membership card. No one in this club has ever received one." The voice came from a middle-aged man. It was Mr. Reese, the executive director of the shooting club. He rarely made an appearance, but today, somehow, he had been standing there all along. He handed the card to Linda. It read, Linda Hayes, granted internal access and participation in advanced training, issued by the club's honorary board. The crowd was stunned. You don't have to prove anything to us, Mr. Reese said, but if you still want to take that challenge, do it for yourself, not for anyone here. Linda looked at the card, then back at the line of targets. She nodded. I don't need a title, but I need those girls sitting out there, the ones no one's ever believed in, to know we have just as much right to hit the mark. Next, Linda stood alone in the middle of the range, like a pause in the middle of an orchestra, surrounded by murmurs, skeptical eyes, and the chill of a sun-faded afternoon. The 6 targets began to power up, small circles that would pop up unpredictably, each for only a fleeting moment, moving in no set pattern. Troy stood not far off, arms crossed, the smirk barely holding on his face. When the first target appears, the timer starts. 15 seconds. 6 targets. 1 shot at it. The loudspeaker echoed like a sentence being read aloud. Linda put on her hearing protection, stepped gently into position, palms still dry. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat. A voice rose in her mind, like a whisper from deep within. Don't shoot to win. Shoot to remind yourself you're still alive. It was Daniel's voice, the man who had taught her everything about guns, breath, and how to keep steady in the chaos of battle. The beep sounded. A target popped up on the left. Bang! She spun. The second target flashed up in an instant. Bang! Third, bang! The fourth appeared at the far edge, off to a sharp 120-degree angle, a nearly impossible shot for anyone who hadn't trained for wide-angle reflexes. But Linda didn't hesitate. Bang! The fifth target popped up behind her right. She turned her whole body, shifting her weight quickly. Bang! 1 left. The clock showed 13.2 seconds. But the final target didn't appear right away. 2 seconds passed. Everyone held their breath. 14.7 seconds. A small click sound indicating the technician had changed the command. The last target popped up, right next to a figure stepping onto the range. Bang! The sound of the bullet echoed as the second hand of the clock ticked into the 15th second. The target fell like a leaf in a strong wind. The entire range went silent. Only the heavy breathing of Troy could be heard. Linda lowered her hand, removed her ear protection, and turned toward Mr. Reese. I don't want to join the coaching team, she said, her voice as even as a calm lake. I just want a corner of the range to practice, and if anyone wants to learn, I'll teach them, as long as they don't judge the student by the shoes they wear. Troy couldn't say a word, because he knew there was no victory that could argue against someone who just hit 6 moving targets in 14.9 seconds with a standard handgun and didn't flinch. Linda turned away toward a young girl who was staring at her from the stands. The girl's eyes were bright, not from idolizing her, but because for the first time she saw someone like herself, standing there among those who didn't believe. After the challenge, Linda returned to the training area, where the neon lights shimmered on the competition schedule boards. The professional marksmen were still gathered, chatting about techniques and victories, but their gazes toward her had changed. They no longer held the disdain they had before. Now they saw her as a true competitor, a part of a world they thought they'd never enter. Linda sat down on a chair, took a deep breath, and gently stroked the handgun that had been by her side for so long. She hadn't expected to find herself here again, facing the surprise and curiosity of those around her. It felt strange, but not unfamiliar. The last time she felt this way was when Daniel was still alive. Her eyes unconsciously drifted to the small suitcase in the corner of the room, containing the most important things in her life, keepsakes that never changed. Inside was a photograph, now yellowed with age, of her and Daniel standing together, their faces lit by smiles on a foggy morning at the training base. She still remembered that day perfectly when he took her hand and said, "Linda, you're the only one who can reach this height, but you need to believe in yourself." She hadn't forgotten those words, nor the day Daniel sacrificed his life. They were on a secret mission in Afghanistan when he was shot in a firefight with a group of insurgents. Linda had been training at a base more than 100 miles away, unable to get there in time. His sacrifice was a devastating blow in her life, causing her to withdraw from the world of firearms. 3 years had passed since then, and she still couldn't forget that moment. But perhaps Daniel's words had stayed with her all these years. She came back, not out of a thirst for victory, but because of an unfulfilled promise. A small sound startled her. The door to the room opened and a club staff member stepped in, his face clearly anxious. "Linda, there's someone who wants to meet you. He says he knows you from before, but didn't say who he was." Linda looked up, squinting at him, then nodded slightly. A part of her felt anxious, but another part sensed a faint glimmer of hope. It could be an old teammate of Daniel's, someone she had known. She stood up, deciding to face it. As she stepped outside, Linda noticed a familiar figure standing next to a luxury car, the light from behind casting his face in shadow. He was a man, somewhere in his 40s, with a steady and confident gaze. When he turned to look at her, Linda recognized him. Michael, one of Daniel's closest teammates. "Linda," Michael spoke, his voice low and filled with concern. "I need to tell you something important. This isn't about shooting, it's about another mission. A mission where you may have to face an unbelievable truth." Linda squinted, feeling his words land like a punch to her mind. A mission? The truth? Questions began to invade her thoughts, and she realized her life wouldn't end at this shooting range. She had to confront her past, the secrets she never thought she'd uncover. Linda walked up to Michael, her heart pounding in her chest. The tension in the air made her realize this wasn't a casual meeting like all the others before. Michael stood waiting, his gaze serious, no longer the enthusiastic teammate from their training days. He was bringing her something important, something that could completely change the path she was on. "Linda, I know you're wondering what's going on, but you need to listen to me," Michael said, his voice unwavering. "There's a secret that Daniel left for you, a secret not just about him, but about your family." Linda froze, a chill running down her spine. "My family?" She couldn't comprehend it. The memories of Daniel were still fresh in her mind, and now something bigger, darker seemed to be waiting. Michael took an envelope from his coat pocket, opened it, and handed it to Linda. She opened the envelope, and inside were copies of documents and unclear photographs. One was an old picture of Daniel from his time serving in SEAL Team 6, but that wasn't all. There was another photo showing a strange man standing next to a military strategy board. She recognized the notes on that board. They were Daniel's. "What is this?" Linda asked, her voice trembling. Michael closed his eyes, took a deep breath before answering. Daniel uncovered a secret network within the military, a project that even high-ranking officials didn't know about. It all involves a deal with international armed organizations and politicians, and you're part of it. Michael's words struck her like a thunderbolt. Before she could process the information, the next sentence nearly left her speechless. This project didn't end with what's already happened. Those connected to Daniel, especially you, will become the next targets. But not everyone in the military has bad intentions. Some want to help you, want you to know the truth. Linda stood frozen, hundreds of questions swirling in her mind. Why hadn't Daniel told her about this? Why had he kept quiet, facing a huge organization on his own without involving her? She felt betrayed, but also understood that if what Michael said was true, she was now in the middle of a war where there could be no retreat. Michael looked at her, his eyes sincere. "You can't go back, Linda. It's already begun, and you have to decide. Do you want help, or will you just stand by while others do what you could do better?" Linda bit her lip, feeling the weight of the decision. She wasn't a coward, and if life had now placed her in a situation where she had to face those who had ruined not only her own life but her family's as well, she wouldn't let them wreak havoc any longer. She had to stand up. Linda sighed, her hand gripping her gun tightly. She knew this battle wouldn't just be about accurate shots or trophies. This was a fight for belief, for the truth she needed to uncover, no matter how painful it might be. "I'll do it," Linda said, her voice strong and determined. Michael nodded, satisfied with her decision, but both knew this was just the beginning. Worse things would come, and Linda would have to face enemies who were not just shadows on the battlefield. Linda stepped out of Michael's office, holding the documents he had just handed her. Each sheet, every detail on it, felt like a piece of a puzzle in a complex picture she couldn't fully comprehend. She felt as though she were standing on a precarious cliff, ready to fall at any moment, yet unable to turn back. Everything around her was foggy, and what she knew about her family now seemed like nothing more than a shadow, vague and distant. As she walked out of the building, Linda couldn't stop thinking about Michael's words. The dark secrets not only involved Daniel, but could also affect her entire family. Daniel was dead, but those behind all of this were still alive, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to continue. And now she had become the target in a game she never chose. That night, Linda made a decision she had avoided for 3 years, to investigate her family's past. She had no other choice. Those who had helped Daniel, his teammates, already knew the truth about the secret organization, and perhaps the answers were somewhere within her own family. She returned to Daniel's house, the place where they had shared so many memories. The house was now empty, devoid of laughter or voices. She walked in, searching for the notebooks Daniel had left behind, the old documents, the scraps of paper that seemed insignificant. But when she opened the last notebook, an old, torn, and yellowed letter fell out from between the pages. Linda opened the letter and read each word, feeling as if she were touching something far too monumental. The letter was from her mother, someone she had never met, leaving an important message about a project called Aurora. This project was not just a military strategy, but also an experiment in control and manipulation, involving high-level political and military decisions. Linda's mother, in her final years, had tried to break the silence and reveal the truth. The horrifying part was that, according to the letter, Daniel was the first to uncover this conspiracy when he was still part of SEAL Team 6. He had realized that the organization he served in wasn't just about protecting the country, but also had darker, hidden purposes involving the manipulation of politicians and the creation of personal power. And everything Daniel had done in the past years wasn't just about fighting for justice, but for one single thing: to stop those conspiracies. Linda looked up at the ceiling, feeling as though the whole world was spinning around her. She couldn't imagine that her family, long thought to be peaceful, was connected to such a monstrous conspiracy. But she knew that in order to free herself from the shadow of the past, she would have to face this truth. She took a deep breath, her hand gripping the documents tightly. Michael had been right. She couldn't stand on the sidelines of this game. She had to keep going, despite the dangers ahead. Her determined gaze grew stronger. She would not let those who had manipulated her life win. Linda knew that, though the road ahead would be difficult, she wouldn't stop until she uncovered the truth and protected those she loved. The next morning, Linda put on the outfit that Daniel had once been lucky enough to bring with him the last time he came home. A simple faded military jacket worn by time, but carrying an invisible strength of spirit. She was no longer the cautious woman who had walked into the shooting range on her first day. What she had gone through in the past few days had forged a new version of herself. Resilient, sharp, and ready to face what lay ahead. The shooting club was hosting a national tournament today with top shooters and high-ranking military figures attending, including some names from the documents Michael had given her. Linda knew this was her only chance to expose them in front of the public. While the crowd buzzed outside the shooting range, Linda secretly handed over the files and the letter from her mother to Rebecca, the club manager, a veteran with close ties to several organizations protecting military personnel's rights. Rebecca glanced over a few pages, her expression stunned. She understood the gravity of the situation and immediately triggered a special procedure, contacting the military press organization and 2 former SEAL Team 6 commanders who had worked with Daniel. The competition began. Linda was invited to compete as an honorary guest, a way to calm the public after her shocking performances. On the stage, Linda was not just prepared with her gun. She was prepared for a dramatic reversal. Before hundreds of live spectators and a nationwide live stream, Linda stepped to the 100-yard line, a distance even Blake Radcliffe had once refused to publicly shoot at, calling it too far for accuracy. She turned toward the organizers and, with a clear voice, said into the microphone, I'm not here to compete anymore. I'm here to speak the truth that my husband, Captain Daniel Hayes, sacrificed his life to protect. The air grew still, as if cut. Linda pulled copies of the documents from her jacket pocket and held them up before the camera lens. She spoke about Aurora, about Daniel, about the names present in the stands today, those who had exploited soldiers for their own hidden agendas. The live stream exploded. A few people in the crowd tried to leave, but were stopped by Rebecca and her group of veterans. At the end of her speech, Linda returned to her shooting stance. She aimed at the target, 100 yards away, a bullseye marked with a bright red A symbol. One shot. The bullseye shattered. The sound of a finality echoed. Immediately after, journalists, investigators, and former soldiers began sharing the evidence. A national investigation was launched. Those who had once stood at the pinnacle of power no longer had anywhere to hide. Linda didn't smile, but her eyes shone, not because she won a shooting contest, but because, at last, justice had spoken through the shot of a woman who had once been dismissed.